Well, thanks again for listening to the Train podcast. This time I talk with Professor Dr. Wolfgang Schöllhorn, but I'm not sure if I pronounced it
Perfect.
correct in German. Okay. And he is best known as the creator of the Differential Learning System. He trained national and international athletes in different sports, and his approach has been followed by leading football coaches, including Guardiola and others. He received in 1990 his PhD in biomechanics from the University of Frankfurt. And after having professorships and guest professorships around the world, he became a professor for training and movement science at the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz in 2007. And he works in the fields of athletics, biomechanics, and motor learning, and has received several national, international prizes, including the Performance Awards of the International Society for Biomechanics for Differential Learning and the 2006 Deutsches Werkbund label. Well, you are well known in the realm of motor learning, and I guess you do a lot of other things. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Welcome. It's my pleasure.
Let's just ask the most important question. What is differential learning?
Uh, I don't know.
There's a lot of variation.
Uh, no, actually, it's only a theory which is explaining that actually we are only able to learn by differences. Because only when you have differences, you have additional or new information. When you have identical repetition, there is no new information, which means that you cannot learn because learn needs or means gaining information.
Okay, so I will try to digest that. So you learn from differences. So let's say I do a movement, I get feedback, and I compare the difference as a way to change my movement or behavior. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this would be one possibility. It is included there as well, but the differential learning is actually emphasizing that there should be differences between two subsequent movements.
Ah,
Or later, other people have translated this in a trial-to-trial variation, which means you perform a movement once, then you perform a movement twice, and the difference between those two movements, they provide the information to learn from the things.
yeah.
And where you get the information from, whether you get this from a coach or from your own sensory system, actually, in the beginning, I don't care.
Okay. So the more the difference, the more you learn?
No, it's an optimum function.
Ah,
This
okay.
is what has been misinterpreted right from the beginning. And this is also another part in my research that from the beginning I did this pattern recognition research, which is closely related to artificial neural nets. And every artificial neural net is trained with noise, and the noise has to have an optimum amount because when it's getting too big, it's too coarse, and when it's too small, then it's not stable enough. So we were also the first who introduced pattern recognition in a process-oriented way, and this is this was always running in parallel. That I was always trying to develop tools, more sensitive tools, to diagnose what I was looking for in the learning area.
Yeah. Okay. So I try to learn on the spot. So you learn by recognizing differences in your movement, for example. And there is an optimal level of difference where you can learn from. And can we just pick an example? Because I want to talk with you about two applied things, namely martial arts and police training. These are the two topics I'm involved in. But let's say defending against a straight punch.
Okay,
What
I will try it with,
yeah, because
for
tradition.
example, with karate.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I did a lot of practice. I almost got the first dan in Shotokan karate. So let's take the Yakutsuki.
Hmm.
Normally, it's taught um, a perfect path where you go in front with the fist, and at the end you turn and look that all the joints are aligned. Okay, this is a very nice theory, but I would say when you are in real life, this very rarely happens. And very often it's recommended to do thousands of repetitions there, especially the Japanese are recommending this. But there you also have to know that actually this repetition in military kind of training was German export.
Ah.
Because when the Prussians won against the French, the Japanese emperor sent a delegation to Europe to look why the Prussians were that successful. And the Prussians were known for military marching and repetitions and all these things. So this was the original export.
Mm.
And now it's told the Japanese way. And this is what you will realize when you go to China, to Chinese martial arts,
Yeah.
that they have a lot more variations in the
Yeah,
system.
I understand. Yeah.
Okay, now this is what I'm recommending for the German national team now for, I would say, more than 30 years almost, that instead of doing all these repetitions, trying to do identical repetitions, we tell them to punch in different directions. So a little bit right in front, a little bit left in front, a little bit down, go in different rotations. And when you do this, you become much more precise in the middle punch.
How does it
And
work?
and you also get a much better feeling how to align, I would say, the body joints
Mhm.
and the timing for first the hip, then the shoulder, and then the fist comes. So this timing has also a lot of variation. And when you only repeat, our system is not sensitive enough to identify the differences. And
Mhm.
this is why very often you need a coach with a very sensitive eye who can identify the differences and they are telling you the differences. But when you actually vary by yourself a lot, then you can feel it by yourself. And this is shown by a more recent research as well, that when you have enough variation, then you don't need external feedback.
How does it work? How does that work? Why?
I
Because
think
it seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah, because we're used to. But think of children, how are they learning to walk during the first 2 years?
I think by trial and
They
error, but
don't
yeah.
they don't listen to the parents. They just try it, they fall down, and they realize by their own feedback what's the best. And for me, very often I hear this in China. I'm visiting China now for more than 20 years, every year at least once or twice. They always tell in India it's the same. You need a teacher or a master who can teach you this. Okay, I was listening to this 1 or 2 days, and then I ran out of patience and I asked, okay, and who was the teacher of the first? So when it is an effective technique, which we have transferred over generations, then everyone should be able to find the same.
Mhm.
And this is, I would say, one of the bases of creative thinking or critical thinking as well, that you should go back to the assumptions. It's
Mhm.
called deconstructivism from Derrida. Go back to the assumptions, test whether the assumptions are right. If yes, try to build up a similar system, but only knowing of the assumptions. But if the assumptions are not correct, then build up a new system with the other assumptions.
Yeah. So don't copy, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, mainly, yeah. Don't copy blindly.
Yeah, don't
You
copy
should
blindly. Yeah.
you should reflect on, and actually, this is nothing else than philosophy enlightenment.
Yeah.
Have the courage to use your own brain.
Yeah. So if you go back to the example of the Gyakutsuki, the straight punch, um, what happens? let's is there a good Gyakutsuki anyway? Like
Yes,
are there things
yes,
in the Gyakutsuki
I
which
would say
are
yes, there is
okay?
one, but it's the big limitation. Everyone is different and it's individual. And this is what we are showing at the moment,
Hmm.
that we have no technique, no ideal or role model, which is valid for everyone and for every moment.
Hmm.
So the individuality, actually, we have shown already in my PhD in 1990, and now we are on the way to look for the situative optimum, which means actually when every punch should be different, then we should prepare our athletes to be adjustable. Okay, there
Yeah,
is a basic technique,
yeah.
but we did a study. It was just before Corona, I think 2019 or 18, where we had a lot of black belt karateka, who did 900 repetitions of Maiguri kicks, foot
Hmm.
kick. And we analyzed them all biomechanically.
Hmm.
And what you see really by time that the relative timing is changing, the relative maxima are changing, and actually doing all these 900 repetitions, the complete system is changing. And this is what we saw already in gait pattern analysis, that already after half an hour without doing anything, the gait pattern has changed by 85%.
85. Okay.
85%. We can
Yeah.
separate, and by 1 hour, it's already
Yeah.
95% without doing anything.
Yeah.
So our system is changing by itself.
Hmm.
And actually, this is one of the biggest neglects in our research, that we never looked to how fast is our system changing per time.
Hmm.
And actually, this is what we can feel already happening with aging. But
Yeah.
it's changing much faster than we expect. And this is mainly why research originally started only in subjects from university when you are between 20 and 30, because then the system is quite constant. During puberty and in elderly, it's changing much faster. But actually, it tells us also that the more it's changing, the more variable you should train,
Yeah.
which
Because
means
you
that with increasing age, you actually should increase the variation again.
and why is that? Because you become more adaptable?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was one of the earliest publications of us that one of the basis of our training idea is that our system is nearly constant.
Hmm.
Okay, now when it's nearly constant, then it makes sense that we start in early childhood with a lot of variation, and at the end we end up with repetitions. But the problem is when the system is changing a little bit and we stay with this approach, then very soon the system goes apart.
Hmm.
Which means, and this were studies which we did, that the mind is developing or stays very often in the same way. We have the same role model, but the body is changing.
Hmm.
And when the body doesn't fit to the mind, then it's not good for performance.
Yeah.
And this is actually happening the whole life. That from I would say when you have a juvenile during puberty, what they are training in the 1st of January is no more valid by December, because the body has grown
Yeah.
by up to 14 centimeters. So the whole biomechanics has changed.
Yeah.
And this is why juvenile and children don't like to repeat.
Yeah.
And they also learn by repetition because the body is changing the system all the time.
Hmm. And if you go back to the Gyakutsuki, let's say there is a traditional learning method which is doing a lot of repetitions with the same technique. Then differential learning would be do a lot of variations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there? I have two questions. First, is in these variations, is there still a basic structure which forms the basic? So, for example, if you do a Gyakutsuki, but let's give a stupid example. If you do a Gyakutsuki with your back feet off the ground or out of balance, it seems to me like, okay, it's a variation, but this is not what you want biomechanically. Is that true? So, are there aspects of the technique which you need? Is that a good way to ask?
As well. This is one of these misinterpretations of differential training that some say, okay, everything is possible. No, it's not.
Hmm.
When you understand my history, I would say then you understand the theory a little bit better. So when I was a biomechanist, we were consulting all the national teams in track and field and in different areas. And when you have a shot putter, just an example, it was Olympic gold medalist. When you tell them, okay, you have to go bicycle riding and running, then they would say, you are nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to add the noise within the possible space of solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So in shot put, we started with do the shot put to the upper right, upper left, move backwards when you do this, lift up the elbow, go with the hand there, go with the hand there, move the head over there, move the head over there. All these little variations. And actually, the first time I applied in a, I would say 100%, in a top athlete was with Frank Busemann, who was a silver medalist 1996 in decathlon. And I applied to him all the, I would say, errors which I have seen in all the top shot putters all over the world. At this time, we had recordings from Werner Günther from Switzerland, from Ulf Timmermann, from GDR, from Udo Bayer. So they were all 23-meter shot putters. And the German national team, in all those little fluctuations which they had, I applied to Busemann.
Mm-hmm.
And within one session, he improved his performance almost by 1 meter.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was all the time shot put, but a lot of variation. And this
Yeah.
is what I went on later, that we analyzed discus throwers, world-class discus throwers in detail. The whole body was analyzed for several weeks. And we looked at all the joint movements, at the path, at the initial and final condition, and we never saw constancy. It was always
Yeah.
fluctuation, always noise.
Can I just ask you a last, let's say, because I want to understand it myself. I'm
Yeah,
doing. Is there so, for example, because I'm a martial arts
yeah,
instructor myself and so on, is there I hear my I hear my students saying now, yeah, but if I do all those variations, maybe they learn the wrong Yakutsuki because bec-
yeah. This is what I have heard now for more than 20 years.
yeah, I can imagine.
This is still combining the old with the differential learning.
Mm-hmm.
This only happens when you repeat the wrong thing.
Aha.
But when you don't repeat, you don't learn the wrong thing.
Okay. Oh, this is very important. Okay.
And a very important part of differential learning from the beginning was, and I introduced this also to some other people from England and Portugal, which were just changing the name, that when you, I would say, when you change all the time, then you don't have a chance to memorize this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is what we meanwhile see, that when you change all the time, actually, it's a kind of overloading the frontal lobe, and overloading frontal lobe is a kind of opening the whole access to the motor cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we see very often, that in the beginning, the athletes, because they are used to repetitions, they try to understand and know it was wrong, and we have to correct this and say, no, just go on, don't care about this.
Yeah. Okay.
And after 5 minutes, it's a kind of, okay, they give up to the control, and then they behave like little children.
Mm.
Okay, just do it, have fun.
Yeah,
And this seems to be the brain state which we need for effective learning.
the joy.
Yeah, joy, excitement, I don't know. It's not always about joy.
No,
Otherwise, you
yeah,
start to
learning state.
get
Yeah,
a smoke and you have
yeah,
joy, and this is
yeah,
no. Uh, you need some effort
yeah.
for this. It's not just about enjoyment without any effort.
Maybe it's I heard a Harvard University professor talking about how creativity is the antidote to anxiety, and she spoke about if you're doing creative things, your anxiety system
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Right. And this is actually just in, I would say, common words described what we see in brain,
yeah.
because anxiety is mainly produced in the frontal lobe. The
Hmm.
frontal lobe is the so-called social cortex, and the social cortex is always thinking of what can happen, what was my experience before, what do other people think about. This is why it's called social cortex, and this is mainly developed between 18 and 19. Uh, and this is very important, I would say, to control, or we would call it to slow down, because
Hmm.
what we know from diseases, especially in Parkinson or multiple sclerosis, even in focal dystonia, we know that it's an overactivation of the frontal lobe.
Oh.
It's an enormous control for need for control.
Yeah. So by being creative, you you slow down that part. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and this
Yeah.
is exactly what all our studies show, that when you are able to do this, then you
Yeah.
become more creative.
Yeah.
And this is what have been checked by football players, by basketball players, from friends I've
Yeah.
heard, even before they have a meeting in a conference, they do some of these exercises,
Yeah.
and the conferences are much more becoming creative.
Yeah. By the way, a little sidestep. Uh, do you know what is the current science about left and right brain hemispheres? In the sense that th there was a time when it was thought that the right brain was for creative and the left for analyzing and so on. And is it still actual science? And is it related to this that we if we involve the right brain by doing creative things, we shut down the analytical? Or I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I would say yes, causally it's still the same science. The right hemisphere is more for holistic
Yeah.
aspects, whereas the left hemisphere is more for structured reductionistic
Yeah.
thinking. And this is, I would say, also related to the individuality, because every person has certain preferences.
Hmm.
And yeah, as the action type group says, listen to your body, not anybody.
That's a great goal. Yeah.
And they relate this also to the brain, the coarse brain structure. And yes, there are a couple of nice, I would say, videos in the
Yeah.
internet where a neuroscientist got a head stroke, and she describes very
Yeah.
nicely what's happening when the left or the right brain is taking over. And yes, it's still the same. And a
Mm.
colleague of mine from Munich, he was suggesting, I think they did some study about this, when you squeeze a tennis ball with the left hand,
Hmm.
it's activating more the right side, and this is changing the whole behavior in the tennis game.
Wow.
And this is
So
actually what we are looking for as well. We are not only looking for sports, we are looking for meditation, qigong, and yoga. What are the
yeah.
effects? And uh, what I can say is that all the things which have been told there are verified in the meantime.
Yeah.
So by means of movement, you can bring the brain in a certain
Of course. Yeah.
state. And this is what we applied as well,
Yeah.
that we told students, 14-year-old pupil, to do some differential rope skipping before math lessons. And yes, this improved the mathematic learning.
Yeah.
And then we do the same afterwards, after math lessons, because we have seen that baby, when it's getting too much information for them, they fall asleep.
Hmm.
And in sleeping, you have these brain frequencies, and we produce these brain frequencies with differential training after math lessons. And yes, they improved
Yeah.
math learning as well.
Great. So I want to summarize for myself right now. So differential learning is about variation, optimal variation within the possibilities. It's about recognizing differences. And we talked about how movement changes brain states. We talked about the Gyakutsuki instead of the traditional methods, making more variations with an important point of view. It's not about uh, memorizing all those repetitions. Sorry, all those variations, because then you can become good in the bad things. And we also mentioned the German influence on Japanese teaching. This is, by the way, very interesting because I've always became interested in why is that the classical Japanese teaching with 100 students doing key eyes on the same. I've thought a lot about it, why this method is, but it's because I also think it's a social thing or it's economical. It's with 100 people you cannot differentiate. Is that what is the
Well, I don't
origin?
know too much about this history. This is what I have learned from my karate teacher,
Hmm.
Efthymios Karamitsos, German national coach, and he's working together with philosophers and historians, and they found this. And what
Ah,
I have realized in China is that there is a lot of influence going across these countries. Uh, I would say the most versatile techniques are taught by the Chinese. Then it's shifting to Korea, where it's Taekwondo, where it's the emphasis on the legs, and Karate, it's on the hand.
yeah,
Now, what I saw in the last couple of years in China, they are still suffering from their occupation by the Japanese during the Second World War.
yeah.
So still in September, they have this alarm to be remembered when the Japanese came.
Ah,
And what you see very often that they are trying to copy certain characteristics of the Japanese. Most extreme, I saw this in Taiwan, that there it's almost an exact copy of Japanese thinking.
hmm. Okay,
And this only yeah, now 50, 70 years
yeah,
where the system is changing.
yeah.
And when you think of several hundred years, it's always dependent on how they are coping with these
Yeah,
deficits and yeah, this is unfortunately very often connected to a master theory that
yeah,
someone has this idea without knowing actually what is the neurophysiological basis of this.
yeah,
And this was my claim that I studied physics and neurophysiology and pedagogy to bring these things to a basis. And this is, I would say, the advantage why differential learning has all these effects in musicians, in handwriting skill things. We also apply this in police main education.
hmm,
It's a neurological and physical basis for this.
yeah. What is the origin of traditional teaching in the sense that we often compare, for example, differential learning or constant-led approach or whatever. We compare it with traditional teaching, and traditional teaching then is seen as the ideal technique. A lot of repetitions, mostly classical teachings. What do you think? What is the origin of traditional learning, and why did it evolve that way?
Okay, one sentence about constraint-led approach.
Hmm.
In constraint-led approach, there's nothing new in it. It's just not knowing about reform pedagogy.
Oh,
So hands off is nothing else than I would say laissez-faire style of teaching.
yeah.
And we can talk about this later
Yeah.
on the history because I taught them in 2000, where they had no idea about practical consequences, the differential learning thing. And actually, I asked them to help me to get my things published in English because at this time my English was even poorer than at the moment. And they just postponed the common publication for 6 years in order
Oh,
to build up in parallel a similar system with other words.
yeah.
Okay, now when we go back to history, and this is what I learned from pedagogy, the origin from the term pedagogy is in the Greek language. Okay, ped means the children, the child, and agog means guiding the child.
Yeah.
So originally in Greek history, a pedagogue, those were the slaves who couldn't be used for anything else,
Hmm.
and they were responsible to guide the sons of rich families to the school.
Yeah.
Because at this time, it was only allowed for men to go to school. Okay, now in school, you see, it's a different thing. The teachers did something different. It was skole, and skole means leisure time, fun, discussion.
Hmm.
So they knew already what is important for learning. Now, what you had in parallel were Sparta, military education for adults.
Hmm.
And this is andragogy.
Yeah.
Andra is the elderly. Okay, then the Romans occupied Greek, and they knew that Greece has very good teachers, so they took the teachers in order to educate their people as well. Okay, now the Romans are known for their military turtle thing,
Yeah.
marching in the same step lengths, so the turtle is dense.
Yeah.
Okay, now everyone knows from military, when you have a group of tall people and small people, the first are walking in very small steps, the last are walking in very large steps, and only the middle are walking in a step length which is corresponding to their body length.
Hmm.
Okay, so they were educated in this way. And there, I would say it was very tempting to control the students
Yeah.
by teaching them.
Yeah.
And this is can be seen in, I would say, in the a whole history. It's called in Germany the Black Pedagogy.
Hmm.
Until actually it was also part of the philosophy enlightenment because philosophy enlightenment said, okay, little children or children are just little adults.
Yeah.
And this
Like
is why
Rousseau.
they
Yeah.
had to wear clothes like the adults,
Yeah.
just in a small size.
Yeah.
So the idea of enlightenment, philosophy enlightenment, was to make them adults as fast as possible. And this was related to military thinking and also church, which is very hierarchical.
Yeah.
And this was the reason why, in parallel, Rousseau came up with this reform pedagogy.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I've learned just recently from a Dutch colleague, that out of this development, the kindergarten was developed.
Mm.
And kindergarten, the founder was Fröbel,
Yeah. Vreubelen. Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
see already that you're making jokes about this,
Yeah.
and this is the attitude of the people about variation and having fun.
Yeah.
But actually, when you read the papers of Fröbel, he exactly wrote, uh, children need enriched environment for having a healthy development.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what you can see in CLA again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nothing new. It's
No.
just old wine in new bottles.
But there should be something new in constraint-led approach. Why? Because
No.
no,
So
no, but otherwise,
and this is what recently Mark Williams wrote.
oh,
Scientific theory needs to make predictions which cannot be made by other theories, and they should be proven and should be verified.
Mhm.
And Mark Williams didn't see this. And he is the chief editor from Human Movement Science.
But is there, because there was another question, because we talked about what differential
Yes.
learning is, how to apply it, for example, to the Yakutsuki. Um, what then is, that is the other question, what then is the difference, because you do a lot of variation, what then is the difference with, for example, constraint-led approach? Because for, if I understand it correctly, they also try to stimulate self-organization.
Yeah, this is what they claim. But sorry, you cannot guide a system and claim, okay, self-organization. Okay, what we found in our pattern recognition research is,
Mhm.
although they were all repeating the same, we could identify individual top athletes.
Yeah.
But by identifying these top athletes, you have to ask, okay, which of these top athletes is then my role model in future?
Mhm.
And this was actually one of the first deconstructions which we did in 1997. And CLA was always referring to this, that we could identify all the top class athletes separately.
Yeah.
And in addition to this, and this is the second assumption of classical training, we could see that none of these repetition or movements was identical.
Yeah.
Okay, now when it's never identical and we don't know what is the role model, what is the sense of repetition?
Mhm.
Because the next movement on the weekend or on the street will be different.
Yeah.
Now, which part of our teaching system is preparing us for the new thing?
Mhm.
Actually, nothing. And this is what I said from the beginning, that we need to enlarge the borders, increase fluctuations to prepare the system to be able to interpolate.
Yeah.
And this was some evidence on this. This is what I'm preparing at the moment. I'm writing a book on differential learning in physiotherapy.
Mhm.
It was already in 1992 when Schmidt and Bjork mentioned that, okay, when you train in a variable practice sense, it's a good result within the limits, but not for extrapolation outside
Yeah.
the area where I was trained.
Yeah. The transfer.
So
Yeah.
differential training says, okay, you have to go much further in order to bring the system to interpolation.
Yeah.
And this corresponds to the training of artificial neural nets. This corresponds to systems dynamics. And this was one of the
Yeah.
first big changes that Carl Newell said, yes, okay, it's this athlete will find his or her solution by interacting of individual and environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when I talked to him 2015, he gave a keynote lecture here in our conference. He said, okay, theoretically it was there, but they didn't know how to continue. And this is what you see in Keith David's papers as well. Until 2000 and 2001, they wrote, okay, it's a nice theory, but there is a lot of research needed to apply this in practice, to apply this to sports, because they were still in the finger movements, and to do research on this.
Yeah.
And there, you mentioned this already, I had already got this prize from the ISPS because I came up with a solution for this.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting until the system is getting unstable through these fluctuations, I said, no, we can induce fluctuations and bring the system to self-organization.
Yeah.
Because and this is what I told to my athlete. By the way, I was 20 years high performance coach as well. I brought out 3 German champions in track and field. That when you increase the fluctuations, I don't know what's good for you, but I can help you to find it.
Yeah.
And
That's yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
your body knows already what is good. My task is to remove the obstacles
Hmm.
which have been taught during school time and whatever to you.
Yeah.
Because originally you had much more variety. Actually, our school system and educational system is restricting us. We learn to live another mind's life.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But can you sorry, go on. Yeah.
Okay, now when you increase the fluctuation, then the system is getting unstable. And one characteristic of instability is, now physics comes in mechanically, when you're standing on one leg, it's very easy to change your state. But when you are down in a stable position, then you need a lot of energy to change the state. So for me, learning was to make the system unstable in order to uh, uh,
Yeah.
change the system with a small amount of energy.
Yeah.
And this was fluctuations, variation all the time, and not, okay, correcting them, etc.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of, I would say, problems of CLA. It's constraining, restricting, and restricting means you're guiding the system towards a movement which they already or pretend to know.
Yeah, that's it. But can you just click on that, because that's an important question I have for you. Because if I understand it correctly, in CLA you manipulate some constraints. So let's for example you place a karateka against the wall so that his elbow cannot come out and he delivers a straight punch.
Yeah, okay.
For
Perfect.
example, whatever. So
Perfect. This is exactly what has been done 100 years ago in methodical series of exercise, guiding the system towards the goal which I have in mind.
yeah.
And this is actually also the definition from Carl Newell, restricting the system.
Mm.
Restricting the system. Now, in Yakutsuki, I would say, okay, go this way and feel it. And by the way, what we know meanwhile is, okay, when I don't know your podcast in detail, but I know that it's very popular in the Netherlands as well, this action type system. We
Hmm.
have horizontal people. They need to move the elbow a little bit sideways, whereas the vertical people, they can stay straight in line.
Hmm.
There's a difference just by this. And the same is with rotation of the hip. The vertical are rotating in a different way than the horizontal. The top people are rotating in different than the bottom people. So there it's already very individual.
Hmm.
I would say, okay, go like this, because sometimes it could happen that, okay, something is in front of you and you have to go around the obstacle.
Hmm.
So why not?
So can you say that that is the difference in CLA you are restricting in a certain way, and in
Well,
differential
there is a historical development. In the beginning, when you look to the literature, in the beginning it was guiding the system
Hmm.
towards a certain thing. Now, the more they, I would say, read and get feedback, it's getting more and more towards differential learning. What we said 30 years ago already. And this is what they now say, okay, we offer constraints, and now they are reinterpreting the constraints in, I would say, in a way, how we knew this from physics. In physics, it was only boundary conditions.
Hmm.
Okay, boundary conditions means you also in science, you need to mention all the conditions in order to be able to replicate a study.
Yeah.
Now I can tell you, there's also a boundary condition, do whatever you want. But this is opening the system.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm telling you, you have to move exactly in this way, it's also a boundary condition, but it's very restrictive.
Yeah.
And differential learning, from the beginning, wanted to open the system, to take advantage of the possibilities, increase your number of possibilities. This is related also to Heinz von Forster, which I met in the 90s. And this is what I always tell to my students. I want to increase your possibilities.
Yeah.
and not restricting the system.
Okay, great.
And actually, the mixture of individual, environment, and task is also going back to Levine, Gestalt psychologist, who said behavior is a function of environment in the individual. This has been clear, I would say, for quite a long time.
Yeah.
This has been described already from a contextual interference approach.
Yeah.
So there's nothing new. It was always about why and how much do we have to vary.
Yeah.
This is what was, I would say, initiated from the methodical series of exercise.
Mhm.
And this was already an adjustment, I would say, to reform pedagogy, because they saw not everyone is on the same level, so they have to start on individual levels.
Yeah.
This is learner-centered teaching.
Mhm.
This was 1925. Okay, and then mainly, and we talked about this in the beginning, the Western Hemisphere was dominated by the Anglo-Saxonian publications.
Mhm.
And to be honest, my impression is that they didn't know about the other things. Although John Dewey mentioned similar things, but he was in contact with a lot of German scientists, for example, Kaschensteiner.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're talking about a topic of which I found very interesting, that if we only read English, then we're missing a lot, because there are, of course, in Germany has a great pedagogical tradition, philosophy, but it also is I mean, I learned. I would like to speak French, for example, also, because all those
I'm pretty
Rousseau.
sure there was
Yeah,
always an exchange. It was always an
yeah,
exchange between the German French and German Russian. It's
yeah,
also because of the emperors
yeah,
at this time. They were looking for corresponding marriages.
yeah,
Uh, but yes, and I would say the Germans had a specific situation after the Second World War, because Germany was separated and the East German part was influenced by the
yeah,
Russians, Soviet Union, and the
yeah,
Western was influenced by the more Anglo-Saxonian language. But we knew we had to know the other things as well. And yes,
yeah.
I learned Russian language for 7 years. I
Wow.
forgot everything
Yeah,
because I never practiced it afterwards. But we knew that there's something different.
yeah,
So we knew about those things and could bring them together, or we had to bring them together, because for us, sports was a kind of Cold War.
yeah,
So the East Germans, and we always had to look for things. And yeah, when I was contacted by Keith Davids for this profiling thing, I thought, hey, this is what we are doing since 20 years,
yeah,
this individual profiling.
yeah,
I, when I was a doctor student since 1985, we were traveling almost every weekend to other competitions to record East Germans, to record Russians, to record, and we did all this biomechanical analysis and we compared this.
yeah,
And this was the reason why I developed this method.
yeah. Can we just apply differential learning to another skill?
Yeah.
This is a more interactive skill. So for those police instructors who are also firearms instructors, we try to learn an officer to what we call shoot, move, and communicate. So using your firearm while moving, for example, because there is a suspect shooting at you, or there is a suspect
Yes.
coming at you with a knife. Well, let's for sake of the argument say that in a traditional teaching you do this very statical, like stepping out of the line, drawing your weapon, shooting, and so on. What would be, from a differential learning approach, be methods to learn officers to move out of the line of the attack and to use their own weapon? Do you have any suggestions?
It's interesting because some years ago I did this with German policemen already. Now, I would say, okay, I could tell you now a recipe, but this would contradict to my theory. Uh, I want the people to understand how they can find it by themselves. Okay, for me, it was always about instability And instability is normally, I would say, an extraordinary variation in the movement. And the instability which I can observe is telling me where the system is able and needs to learn. Now, the system or the policemen are doing this without consciousness. They are not aware of this. So in order to make them aware, or the system aware, I don't know if it's cognitively aware, but I increase this fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and this was also from the beginning of differential learning, I create a situation where they can feel immediately by themselves the consequences of their behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, now in sprint running, we know, okay, we are not only training 60 meters sprint or 100-meter sprint, we go over distance, 120, 150, up to 200 meters. For me, it would be the same in policemen, that they not only stand, they have to jog and they have to sprint. And while they are sprinting, they have to do this movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to do it also, I would say, with some limitations, because sometimes it could happen that someone is coming from behind or I'm standing against the wall where I cannot move this elbow. So I have to find another solution for this.
Yeah.
And this is nothing else than nothing new. This is problem-based learning.
Mm-hmm.
Confront them with problems which they could face, and they should find their solution by themselves. And this is one of the first approaches which I demonstrated to Duarte Arouche in Portugal, because they were no coaches. They had never experience as athletes and as coach. That I said, okay, now I show you 4 exercises. The group of football players, there were 400 football coaches. I show you 4 exercises and you show me 5 other variations of this, forcing them to find alternatives.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, now you will find 5 and I will find another 5 for your variation.
Yeah.
And continue.
Yeah.
And then you have a completely different training situation. It is actually what you need as a sportsman, I'm pretty sure as a policeman as well, that you learn to make decisions.
Yeah.
And this is one of the important things. I just recently have heard a podcast on creativity, and they were recommending, yes, when we have these meetings, you have to do this and this. And you should meet every 4 weeks to do this. And I said, yes, it's good for poor creativity. Real creativity happens every day. In most of the situations, I'm thinking of, okay, is there a different way how I can solve this? Okay, toothbrushing, right? With left. Okay, I can keep hold the toothbrush in this way, in different ways. I can twist my head and brush the teeth with twisted head as well.
Yeah.
The same when I'm walking. Okay, I can walk straight, but I can also walk up and down. I can walk with external rotated feet. I can walk with internal. I can walk whatever. And this keeps me flexible as well.
Yeah.
Try to walk with rotating head. A lot of people are not able to do this, but this is causing you to learn to make decisions and becoming creative. Because creative from the Latin sense means producing something by yourself.
Is creativity the same as producing something new? Totally new, but
There
no.
are two.
Yeah.
I think there are different or multiple definitions of creativity. Some it's only to find something new for you. The other is find something new for the humankind. For me, in the original sense, it's only the first step is producing something by yourself. And when you do this a lot, then you go higher and higher, and then you will reach the other levels as well.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, if you like, I want to ask you something about cognition. Recently, there was a nice paper, Constraints of the Constraint-Led Approach in American football, and they had a nice picture of the role of cognition. I want to ask you about cognition in the sense that I've worked a lot with teams. So, for example, police teams, but also in emergency medicine. And one of the most important things there is what they call shared mental models. So we move
Shared
to
what?
shared mental models.
Okay, yeah.
So that as a team of 8 or 10 people, say for example, police team, an arrestatie team, SWAT team, you go to a suspect, you have a plan, you have to each of you has a role, and I have to know what your role is so I can do my thing and so on. It's the same on the operation room, of course. The surgeon does this, the anesthesiologist does this, and so on. So we have to be a team mental model. Can you speak or a little bit about differential learning with regard to teamwork, in the sense that if I if I'm a part of a team and I'm doing a lot of variations in the action, nobody knows what I'm doing. This is of course this is a stupid, but I want to make the question. So how do you do if there is a lot of variation in a team and you have to make an action, you have to arrest a suspect, a terrorist, and so on. Yeah, what can differential learning do in the prepare phase, the preparation? Is it for teamwork also?
Okay.
Maybe that's a question.
I've learned by myself. I should talk only about things which I know and which I did some research. And this is one reason why I needed some time to publish all these things, because I first wanted to be safe. But related to teamwork,
Yeah.
first thing is we have to differentiate between the training and the competition.
Hmm.
Okay, in shot put, you have a certain technique. In the competition, there you don't vary anymore. It's more about, okay, you are prepared and you will produce this against all the disturbances, very constant. And the variation is mainly to be prepared for eventual disturbances.
Yeah.
You can cope with this.
Yeah.
Okay, now in teamwork, we tried this in team rowing,
Hmm.
four-man rowing. And there we had a task, okay, the man sitting in front, he should change all of a sudden the frequency. And the other should feel it and should adjust.
Hmm.
Okay, and then someone, um, I don't know how you call this in English, but somehow the skull is not gripping the water correctly.
Yeah.
Some maybe air.
Yeah.
Okay, produce this uh, during during training, and the team has to compensate.
Yeah.
And now all the four should go out of phase. How long do you need to get in phase?
Yeah.
By the way, this was one thing which I suggested to a colleague of the Netherlands team, how they developed these anti-phase rowing. This is what I learned in bobsleigh, that when the pushers are running in different frequencies, it's more effective than when they have the same frequency.
Mm.
We know this from engine. When you have this four-step engine, they are all out of phase. When they would go in the same phase, you would always move yeah, like a rowing boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now related to this teamwork, uh, this reminds me to actually the beginning of differential learning. That in the beginning, I was trying to apply all my knowledge from which I learned as a student. I gave the instruction and I asked the athletes, how do you feel and what do you think? Okay, I needed about 1 year until I realized, forget about language. They can tell you whatever they want. It's completely different than what I saw, what their body was talking about.
Hmm.
This is why I first did differential language.
Mm.
So I never repeated an instruction twice. I always used different languages.
Mm.
Different instructions. Very often I use metaphors, but you can also, or sometimes it's not possible. So lift up the knees in front of approaching the takeoff in long jump. Okay, you can describe this as make the hip angle smaller, but okay, varying the language.
Yeah.
And this is mainly related to communication theory, that everyone is interpreting a term according to their history.
Yeah.
And this is, I would say, also important for group work in teams. What do I want to achieve as a team? And this should be put very abstract. In football, I would say, okay, we want to achieve a goal and we have to hinder the opponents to shoot a goal.
Yeah.
First, then the second is, I have to help my teammates to achieve this. That's all. I have to help them. How can I help them the best? And this also related to action type, a model that we know meanwhile, and this is coming actually from Japanese medicine, that we have different motivations. So some are, for them, it's very important to understand the problem before they go into actions.
Yeah.
Others, they first want to try. And 4 weeks later, we can talk about a theory. Others, they need competition. The other one was better than you, and then they go up. Others, they do competition with themselves. I always want to improve myself. Others, they want to be individual. Others, they do it because of the group. So they all have different motivations. And I think important part in teams is to find these individual things, to talk to them in different languages. And the other thing is, when you explain this to the team, it's a kind of developing tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can accept that they have different motivations and you cannot change this. It's just accept this. Okay, they are different again, and we don't have to convince them for my idea. No, we can both learn from the differences. And this was one of the beginning of differential learning as well, that the European approach normally is you have a state A, state B, made a compromise, and both are frustrated. The Chinese way is state A, state B, stay there, and both can learn from the differences.
Oh.
By the way, also a nice model for relationships.
Yeah.
But this is what I would like to apply in experiments, and I would really love to do this in teamworks.
Yeah. The role of cognition. Can you speak a little bit about the role of cognition in differential learning? And what I mean by that is, it seems to me, because I heard Rob Gray talking about it, about automatization, cognition, and so on. And I got the impression, but I can be totally wrong. So Rob, I'm sorry if I'm wrong for that, but
No, you're not. Cognition
yeah.
is not very well developed in differential learning because I think this is more the area of psychologists.
Hmm.
And I would love to cooperate with them. My background is biomechanics, neurophysiology, and pedagogy. And we applied a little bit of this, that we trained them by imagining variable exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine this exercise, imagine this, all the things. And we had similar effects, but not as strong as the other ones when you perform this, when you execute a movement.
Yeah. But in your system, in your line of thinking, does for example, concepts like automatization or memory, does it on a theoretical level, does it play a role? I'm not sure if
Uh,
I'm asking the question.
indirect, indirect memory, this could happen somehow there, but the memory is not very specific. It's, for me, it's more a net, like artificial neural net.
Yeah.
As a mathematician, I would say it's more a high-dimensional matrix.
Yeah.
And all these little components of this matrix can compensate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how our system has survived during the development of humankind.
Yeah.
So
but
our
yeah.
brain, and this was one of the most impressive observations which I had in Leipzig during my professorship there. They asked piano players in a MRI scanner to repeat the same movement as often as they can. And you saw all the time different activations in the brain.
Mm.
And the same you saw in when you do muscle EMG,
Mhm.
electromyogram, you see the same. You can do the same movement, but the activation of the muscles is always changing.
Mhm.
And for me, it was always a hint that our system actually is not prepared for repetitions.
Mm.
And this is what we see meanwhile, when you have a combination of being very ambitious and repeating, this ends up in disease.
Say it one more time. If you are,
If you are very ambitious
yeah.
and combine this with repetition,
Mhm.
this ends up in disease.
Mm.
This is what we know from biomechanics, because then cartilage is used only in a small area.
Aha.
The same with the muscle. Okay, the muscle is getting dense. And this is what I learned in martial art as well. Okay, by myself, I had a biceps injury from pole vaulting. And Western medicine told me, uh, you have to do a surgery. And I knew about the problems of surgery. So I went to Chinese medicine and they said, no, do the Tai Chi movement, open from the shoulder, strengthen the rotator cuff. And I'm still doing the javelin throwing without a surgery here.
Ah.
Because the muscles around, I know that the muscles around can compensate
Mm.
for a certain amount. And the
Yeah.
same is up here.
Yeah.
And again, this is, I would say, an emphasis of trying to find always different solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that. Yeah. Is that a core message of differential learning also?
Yes, but again, it's a limitation. In earliest childhood, you shouldn't do this with the emotions. And this is what we meanwhile see when someone is emotionally very stable, then we can vary a lot in the motoric area.
Mhm.
But when they are emotionally unstable, then they are asking for these repetitions because this is giving them stability.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with this. It's necessary for a lot of people, but it's a different aspect. It's not motor learning.
There was a study by your colleagues from Germany, Mario Staller. He did a
Yeah,
study
yeah,
about.
I know him. Yeah, he
He did a
did
study.
some police studies in Wiesbaden, I think, and in Cologne.
Yeah, correctly. And he what they found also was that the explicit learning. Sorry, the people that there was a group of people who didn't like the implicit learning because they felt what you're talking about now. They felt not safe is not a good word, but they needed more. How do you call it? More control, more. Yeah, yeah, more.
Yeah, they needed exact instructions.
Yeah, that's maybe that's also psychological.
There are different things. This could be, and
Yeah,
this, I would say, should be done some research on this.
yeah,
And it's again going to individuality.
yeah,
Some people need this. They have a preference of the left codex.
yeah,
Okay. And for example, horizontal people, they, in the majority, not all, but they say, give me all the information. I will find my own structure.
yeah,
The other ones, they need clear structure from the beginning.
yeah. That's
And you
important.
always have both in this group.
Yeah,
There's no advantage of one or the other. For me, it would be the art to bring them together and take advantage of these things. Because horizontal, they have a little problem to go forward.
hmm,
Whereas vertical people, they go forward, but they don't learn because they never go left and right.
mm,
And it's the art to bring them together to take advantage of both.
yeah.
But explicit, implicit, you mentioned this already. Uh, when you do differential training, actually you are in the middle of implicit learning. Because,
Yeah, in the middle of implicit learning. Yeah,
yeah, because all the athletes which apply this, Busemann especially, he said, it feels good, but I don't know why.
Hmm.
So, and this is one of the problematic definitions, I would say, from explicit learning. Explicit learning is very often defined by being able to talk about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, just recently, a colleague from Bielefeld in Iran, they did a study on representative things, whatever. And by giving them a lot of different instructions in a differential learning approach, they learned also what they could look at. And they could talk about a whole thing in a much more complicated way than the other ones who got explicit instructions.
Yeah.
But they couldn't describe how the system is moving together.
But there isn't, how do you say it? Because they also talk about the Tashek knowledge problem.
Yeah, right.
And but I think, is it, for example, as an educator, this is just thinking right now, eh? As an educator, it seems to me important to also explain why I'm doing things, because maybe other people can learn from that. What do you think about that?
I'm smiling. I would say this is showing that you are in an action type top, walking from the top. You are someone who needs to understand the system
Yeah, yeah,
before you go into action.
absolutely.
It's only 50%. The
Yeah.
other ones, and I have seen this in discus throwing, Jürgen Schult, former world record holder, he knew exactly what has to be done everywhere. The other guy, I think it was Lars Riedel, I don't care, it feels good, perfect.
Hmm.
Let's try. So there are, I would say, individual differences. And I would say a good coach should be able to talk in both languages.
Yeah, that's what I mean. As a coach, or as an educator, or as a teacher, you have to, is it, then you have to do both, because
Not only both, it's much more.
yeah, of course, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say differential learning is starting in differential language.
Hmm.
Try to give 10 different instructions to achieve a single movement.
Yeah, so that everybody can pick up what
They
they,
can take
yeah,
what they think they need.
yeah. So this is exactly the opposite as giving the best
It's
instruction,
yeah, it's a disaster.
best cue.
And I would say yes, there's also a lot of influence. I mentioned this also in pedagogy, in your pedagogy question. This is also related, I would say, to a certain amount to religion. It's just transferring the mind. There's one God, so there must be one solution.
Hmm.
And actually, there's no reason for this. And not a lot of people know this, but because, oh, but this was the motivation of Newton's law. So he
Oh.
thought there's only one God, there must be only one force to create this. So force is the origin of movement. But when you look to this equation, it's at the same time. When something is at the same time, how can the left side be the origin for the right?
Hmm.
This is based on his religious beliefs.
Aha. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we can talk a lot, because I also found out you were interested in yoga, in qigong, and
Yes.
yeah,
Actually, this was yeah, also by coincidence, or it was mainly because of my curiosity. Um, I met a Chinese student here, and he was talking about Qigong, and I had this idea maybe Qigong and differential learning has some similarities. So we went to China, and I did all these Qigong studies, and then I became interested in traditional Chinese medicine as well. And yes, we got some monks from them, and we did the studies, EEG studies. And yes, we saw that when you do differential training for 5, 10 minutes, you have a similar brain state like those monks have after 20 years of meditative experience.
ah,
Okay, they can keep this But meanwhile, some Chinese groups are using differential training to get faster into these brain states. And very similar, it's in yoga. We just started this, and this is a part of our master program, Movement and Well-being, where our students have to go, can go 2 months to India to learn yoga and Ayurveda, and also go to China to learn TCM and Qigong. And the problems which appear there, we are trying to investigate with our physical methods.
Wow.
And this is
That's
what we meanwhile transfer even to our most recent master program. It's a digital master program on innovative coaching in high performance sports, where we really include this in coaching, not only in diagnosis, performance analysis. No, what methods do we have to change the state? It's not only about diagnosis, to change this, and it's about this yoga, qigong. There are a lot of different
yeah.
breathing techniques, also differential training, and I would say it's opening a completely new field in research as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting, because I'm also heavily involved in martial arts and all those traditions. It's so great. There is so much wisdom also there.
This was actually a part of this development as well. That when I learned this karate with Eftimus Kamitsos, I went to Taiwan, and there I saw these martial art museum in Taipei, and meanwhile they have in Shanghai as well. And they did measurements, a punch on a force plate.
Yeah.
And okay, they produced certain force and said, okay, warming up and do a punch. Okay, perfect. But then I said, okay, moment, let's meditate and do the same punch. And the force increased by, I would say, 100%.
Ah,
And it was more about relaxation, the antagonists, in order to increase the same power. And
yeah.
very often we see that our antagonists are hindering us much more than the
Yeah.
weakness of the agonist.
What kind of meditation did you use?
Um, it's, how do you call this? Uh,
In German also good.
it's the spiritual, making the system empty,
Oh.
wait until the information gets into you. And
Okay.
it's initiated by breathing, and then you focus on the third eye, and then all of a sudden it turns.
Do you also do you practice Qigong or yoga yourself?
I do meditate in different contexts, but not only with sitting. Meditation means coming to your own middle, and you can do this also by walking
Yeah, of course.
or by doing. Just be in the
Present.
situation and don't think about future and don't think about the past. Being here in the moment.
Yeah,
And actually, this is what you learn in differential learning as well.
yeah,
That you learn to be in the moment, because what I did previously, it's like trying to collect split milk.
yeah,
I cannot change, but I will try my best, and the next time I will try it better.
yeah,
But it's only in the moment.
yeah,
And actually, I would say this is the philosophy of martial arts.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Is there one book or one article people should read, which is, or do you have an inspiring book? Okay, in the
Well,
spirit
no,
of differential learning, there
yes,
is not
yes.
one book, but
Uh, Last question. This is the reason why I changed my background, because otherwise you would see all my books. But no, to be honest, I began to read very late. And actually, I'm happy to do this because during this time, I learned to think, also in philosophy. And this allowed me to develop a thing which actually was declared for being not possible by Bernstein. Bernstein said, if someone wants to quantify topology, he will fail from the beginning. You can
oh,
read this. And when I read this book, I did it already with this pattern recognition thing. This, by the way, one of the problems which I had, or why all these approaches were focused only on the metrics. So you have to stay in one topology, in one movement, and this can be only stabilized when you vary the matrix.
Mhm.
And because of my method developing, we could vary the topology as well.
Yeah.
And this was slowing down all these developments, and this was verified by Carl Newell and Mike Turvey as well, that this actually was the big progress. Now, related to books, I found a nice quote from a German philosopher. If you read a lot, you only learn to think with other people's head. So I would rather encourage people to think first by yourself and try really hard to solve the problem by yourself. And don't give up too early.
Uh-huh.
When I have a problem, I'm trying to look for all the possible solutions. And I would say after 4 weeks, when I don't find anything, then I start to look for literature.
Okay. That's great. Yeah,
First,
this,
try to
yeah.
solve the problem by yourself. And for me, yeah, I would say there is no, it's not possible. If someone says it's not possible, I say, okay, now let's try.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. So searching first principles.
Think by yourself
Yeah, think by yourself. Yeah,
first.
first, yeah.
And only when you go into a one-way street, dead end road, then go outside. And you need more time to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
that,
by the way,
yeah,
this is supported by brain research as well. When you only solve crossword puzzles or Sudoku or whatever, it's just okay, keeping the system alive. It will not change anything in the intelligence
yeah.
area.
Well,
Intelligence is what you need when you don't know how to continue.
yeah. So I have to burn all these books.
No, I don't know. Maybe, no, very often you are just in a, I would say, limited, and this is what I did also
Yeah,
with my athletes. Very often I send my athletes to other coaches. I told them, I don't see the problem at the moment. Go there, maybe they see something.
yeah,
And then you can discuss, and it's not about owning my athlete.
yeah,
No, my aim is to increase the possibilities of my athletes and of my students.
yeah. Well,
And very often, just
yeah.
take a book, read a sentence, and bring this in connection to your momentary thoughts.
Yeah,
It's
that's also a great
also
one.
a
Yeah.
nice exercise.
Yeah, that's a nice exercise. When I'm writing my own books, I always, oh no, lately I try not to read before
Right. Yeah, this is it.
because otherwise I'm just repeating.
And this is
Yeah.
also a very nice quote, which I learned in China. If you want to be unhappy, just compare. And very often
Yeah.
when you start to read a book,
Yeah.
oh, it could be like this, and
Yeah.
no, go for it. And then later you can compare. Maybe I
Yeah.
can use this, or maybe I can use this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all the things you have done and the message of differential learning.
You're welcome.
And
Thanks to you.
I will send people to all the articles you wrote and so on. So thank you so much. Oh, also listeners, and till next time. And I will talk to you a little bit afterwards.